You see, there's something fascinating about the way our minds work when it comes to emotional memory, especially for men. People often assume that if someone walks away or doesn't reach out, it means they've forgotten you, that you didn't matter as much. But the truth is often the opposite. Just because someone isn't mentioning your name doesn't mean they're not thinking about you. When a woman triggers a genuine emotional experience in a man, something profound shifts. It's not logical, it's not controllable, and it's definitely not forgettable. Consider this. We don't remember everyone we meet. We don't even remember every person we date, but we do remember how certain people made us feel. When a woman enters a man's life and makes him feel something rare, something he hasn't quite experienced before, or perhaps hasn't felt in a very long time, that becomes imprinted in his emotional memory. He may not consciously reminisce every day, but there are moments, random ones, when something triggers him and it all comes flooding back. That particular laugh you shared in the car, the way you challenged him in conversation, not confrontationally, but in a way that awakens something in him. The way you looked at him when he was vulnerable and didn't judge him for it, didn't try to fix him, didn't shame him. You simply saw him. Those moments matter more than you realize. We live in a world where most people are trying to be liked. They attempt to impress. They try to be agreeable. But when a woman appears as herself, authentic, warm, confident, and emotionally present, it creates a contrast so stark, so undeniable that it sticks. It's not about perfection. It's about authenticity. It's about being that woman who isn't afraid to demonstrate her standards, who's comfortable with silence, who doesn't overextend herself to prove her worth, a woman who understands that her presence alone is sufficient. That kind of woman is like a breath of fresh air to a man who's accustomed to surface level connections. And when he experiences that, something inside him begins to transform, even if he's not ready to acknowledge it. Here's where it becomes even more intriguing. Most men don't realize how rare that feeling is until they attempt to find it again. They'll re-enter the dating world, swipe through profiles, go on dates, and continue searching for that spark they felt with you. And when it doesn't appear, not in the same way, not with the same depth, they start to understand that what they had wasn't ordinary. It wasn't replaceable. That's when forgetting becomes impossible, because now they're not just remembering you, they're remembering the version of themselves that existed when they were with you, the way they felt, the way they behaved, the way you made them believe in something beyond just physical attraction or playful banter. That's what gets under the skin. That's what lingers. When a man feels emotionally safe and attracted simultaneously, it creates an imprint that doesn't fade simply because time passes. He could be with someone else, he could be busy, he could be trying to move forward, but that doesn't mean his mind won't drift back to that one profound conversation at 2:00 a.m. That road trip you took together, that moment when you touched his hand and everything just slowed down. And here's the paradox. Even if he's the one who walked away, even if he ghosted or went cold or said, I'm not ready for something serious, that doesn't mean the feelings weren't genuine. Some men leave not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. And they're not emotionally equipped to handle it. That's not your fault. It's not a reflection of your worth. In fact, the intensity of what he felt might be precisely why he distanced himself. Because let's be honest, when you're accustomed to shallow connections, real connection can be terrifying. It demands vulnerability, it demands honesty, it demands that a man elevate himself. And if he's not there yet, he retreats. Even in his retreat, even in his silence, he doesn't forget. His mind won't allow him to, because real emotional impact doesn't disappear. It waits. It resides in the quiet. It emerges when he least expects it, when he hears a certain song or watches a particular movie or finds himself laughing at something you once said. And in that moment, he's transported, not to some idealized fantasy, but to you, to the very real, tangible feeling of being understood, of being seen, of being drawn out of his shell without being pushed. That's what keeps replaying in his thoughts. So if you're sitting there wondering whether he ever thinks of you, if he remembers, if he felt what you felt, I want you to know this. If you triggered a real emotional experience in him, he can't forget, even if he's trying, even if he tells himself he's over it, even if he tells others he's moved on. Some part of him knows what he lost, And that's not something you need to chase or remind him of or prove. Just trust that the impact you made, the one rooted in authenticity, in presence, in emotional depth, already did the work for you. And if you were unforgettable, he already knows it. You know, it's interesting. It's not always the loudest, most dramatic relationships that linger in someone's mind. It's often the ones that had a quiet kind of intrigue, a subtle pull. And that brings me to something many people overlook when trying to understand why they can't stop thinking about someone or why someone else can't seem to forget them. Sometimes it's the mystery that creates memory. Now, I don't mean mystery in the sense of playing games or hiding who you are. That's not what this is about. Real mystery comes from being authentically layered. It's about being someone who doesn't immediately reveal everything, someone who has depth, who unfolds themselves gradually. Not because they're withholding, but because who they truly are simply can't be comprehended in a single conversation or a couple of weeks. You see, when a guy meets someone who's emotionally complex, someone who has her own life, her own passions, her own inner world, he doesn't just experience her, he becomes curious. And curiosity is one of the most powerful emotional hooks in existence. When you spark a man's curiosity, not through manipulation, but by genuinely being someone with substance, his mind keeps returning to you because it's not finished. It hasn't figured you out yet. That's the mistake so many people make in early dating. They feel this pressure to show their entire hand, to prove they're worth choosing by listing everything they are, everything they can offer, everything they've been through. But what happens then? It removes all the tension. It eliminates the slow reveal. And once someone feels like they already know everything there is to know about you, the intrigue begins to diminish, even if you're amazing. But if instead you're someone who brings presence, kindness, and honesty while still leaving room for discovery, you create an experience that persists. You become the kind of person who, even after the conversations end, his mind keeps revisiting. Maybe it's the way you phrased something or a small moment that didn't even seem significant at the time, but now feels like a thread he wants to pull on. And that's the thing. When a man can't fully explain why he's thinking about you, he just keeps thinking about you. Because truthfully, there are people we meet who are lovely, compatible, sweet, but they don't ignite that deeper curiosity. And it's not because they're not good enough, it's just that the interaction felt a little too superficial, a little too easy to define. And once we define something too quickly, we move on. Now contrast that with someone who doesn't need to fill every silence, who doesn't try to impress you with their resume of traits, but who simply shows up as herself, grounded, warm, and somewhat elusive. That woman, that energy sticks. She's not trying to elicit a reaction. She's not attempting to rush connection. She's allowing the relationship to develop at its natural pace. And what that does is this: it gives a man the space to fall in love with discovering you. We forget that part of genuine connection isn't just compatibility, it's discovery. And when you allow someone to discover you gradually, they value each piece of the puzzle more because they had to pay attention. They had to remain engaged. They had to earn access to those deeper aspects of you. And guess what? We value what we earn. So even if things didn't work out between you and him, even if life pulled you in different directions, or he wasn't ready, or the timing was off, your energy, your presence, the intrigue of who you are, it doesn't just vanish, it lingers, it replays. And he might try to distract himself, he might try to date other people, but if he doesn't find that same slow burning mystery, that sense that he's still learning, still uncovering, he'll notice. He might not be able to articulate it, but he'll feel that something's missing. Because once someone has experienced that kind of emotional gravity, that quiet magnetism, you can't simply forget it, especially when it wasn't born from effort or manipulation, but from truth, from depth, from someone simply being who they are without the need to be understood all at once. And maybe that's what's happening right now. Maybe he's out there trying to move on, trying to forget, but he can't, because something about you didn't provide all the answers. You left a question in his mind, a story that didn't reach its final chapter. And now, even if he's pretending otherwise, his mind is still searching for the missing pages. That's the kind of impact you make when you live with depth and quiet confidence. And it's why, even when he tries, his mind won't let him forget you. Even if the relationship wasn't right for him at that time, that doesn't mean your presence didn't awaken something inside him. Timing is such an overlooked factor when we discuss love. People tend to romanticize this idea that if two individuals are meant to be together, they'll find a way no matter what. And sure, that sounds poetic, but real life is more complicated than that. Sometimes people encounter the right person at the wrong moment. And that can be even more haunting than never meeting at all. When a man meets someone who genuinely connects with him, someone who challenges him, inspires him, illuminates the room in a way he didn't even know he was searching for, but is not ready, it creates this internal conflict. He recognizes on some level that what he's experiencing is rare, but perhaps he's still figuring himself out. Maybe he's pursuing other priorities. Maybe he hasn't healed from his past or hasn't developed into the kind of man who can maintain a healthy, intimate relationship. And so what does he do? He lets her go. But here's the truth no one discusses. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean it was insignificant. It means he wasn't in the right place to appreciate it. And that stays with him. Time continues, life happens. He dates other people, immerses himself in work, maybe even convinces himself that he's moved on. But every now and then, unexpectedly, something brings her back. Could be a scent, a song, a phrase she used to say, a memory that emerges while he's waiting in line for coffee or driving home late at night. He'll remember how she made him feel, how she looked at him, as if she saw something deeper, not who he was, but who he could become. And in that moment, his chest tightens because he realizes it wasn't the timing that made her special, it was her. And even if the timing was wrong, the connection was authentic. It's like a bookmark in his life. He might progress to other chapters, but that page where she existed never completely closes. It remains there, marked, undeniable. Because while he may have justified walking away back then, told himself he wasn't ready or that circumstances were too complicated, he's now beginning to wonder if what he truly wasn't prepared for was growth, was intimacy, was someone who demanded more from him simply by being herself. And that's the kind of woman you were. You didn't need to cry out for attention or plead with him to stay. You moved with dignity. You created space, not silence. You didn't attempt to convince him of your worth. You embodied it. And that right there is what persists in his mind. Because he didn't lose someone desperate to be loved by him. He lost someone who already loved herself. You see, when a man walks away from someone extraordinary, it doesn't just affect the heart, it affects the mind, it plants seeds of doubt, regret. He begins to measure new experiences against something that felt authentic, something that caught him off guard in the best possible way. And as much as he might try to suppress it or bury it beneath distractions, that memory resurfaces when he least expects it. Because we don't forget people who awaken something within us, especially not when we weren't prepared to receive it. That's what makes your impact so powerful. Not that you remained, but that you showed him what was possible and then departed when he wasn't ready to rise to meet it. You became the contrast, the before and after moment, the moment he'll keep reflecting on. Not because you made him feel comfortable, but because you made him feel alive. And when the commotion settles and life decelerates, he'll realize that not all timing is equal. Sometimes the right person appears to reveal something not to stay. And the ache he feels, that's the part of him that knows he relinquished something genuine. He may have attempted to move forward, but his mind won't let him forget. If you perceived him in a way he hasn't yet learned to see himself, believed in him, challenged him, or made him feel capable of more, he will keep circling back mentally. Because in losing you, he didn't just lose a person, he lost the version of himself he was becoming around you. And that right there is something that endures. See, most people navigate life being perceived a certain way. They're accustomed to being understood through surface labels, what they do professionally, how they appear, their financial status, what kind of jokes they tell at gatherings. They get categorized, and whether from ego or simply routine, most often they accept it. They exist there. But then someone arrives who doesn't just see the categories, they see between them. You saw him not just for who he was, but for who he could become. You spoke to that aspect of him that perhaps he hadn't even given much attention to yet. Maybe he had aspirations he wasn't pursuing, insecurities he was concealing behind bravado, potential that was collecting dust because no one had recognized it. And you did. Perhaps you didn't state it explicitly. Maybe it wasn't, you could be this or that. Maybe it was in how you inquired about what energized him, how you observed him when he discussed things he cared about, how you didn't tolerate his excuses. You didn't pamper his complacency or inflate his ego. You inspired something better. That energy, it's uncommon. Most people either elevate someone to avoid conflict or diminish them to feel superior. But what you did, you achieved that perfect balance of support and standard. You didn't fall for the polished exterior. You engaged with the essence. You challenged him. You encouraged his greatness, not his comfort. And that kind of presence does not go unnoticed. So what happens when a man encounters someone like that? Someone who sees beyond his current state and believes in the man he could become. A mirror gets held up, and not just any mirror, a mirror that reflects an elevated version of himself. A mirror that makes him question, what if that really is me? What if I am capable of more? It ignites something profound. But here's the twist. Once that reflection vanishes, it's not easily forgotten, because the version of himself he witnessed in your presence, that more motivated, more grounded, more connected man, he misses being that person. That's what he can't overcome. He might not articulate it explicitly, he might not fully comprehend it, but when he lies awake at night or when he's with someone else who doesn't spark the same energy, there's this quiet yearning, not just for you, but for how he felt around you, for who he was becoming. And even if it concluded, especially if it ended without drama or anger or without chaos or hostility, there's this subtle ache that accompanies him because you didn't leave destruction in your wake, you left growth, you left dignity, and in that you left impact. That's why he can't release it, because you didn't represent merely a chapter in his life, you represented a turning point. And even if he didn't rise to meet it, even if he wasn't prepared, that moment remains tattooed on his story. It continues to whisper to him. You were becoming better. You were evolving. You were closer to your truth. And regardless of how many distractions he piles on top of that memory, regardless of how many nights out, casual relationships, or ego boosts, he'll keep returning mentally, because we don't forget those who saw our authentic selves. We don't forget those who made us believe we were more than we were settling for. So when he attempts to move on, when he convinces himself he's fine, that it's in the past, there's a part of him that still wonders who he might be today if he'd grown into the man you perceived. That's the part his mind won't allow him to forget. Let's talk about chemistry, real chemistry. The kind that doesn't just ignite a spark, it transforms the atmosphere in the room. The kind of connection where even silence feels meaningful, where the way you gazed at each other communicated more than countless words ever could. That's the type of bond that, once experienced, is impossible to forget. And no matter how hard someone tries to progress, no matter how many diversions they introduce, that feeling persists. You see, when a man has shared a genuine connection with someone, it's not just about what you did together. It's not about the dinners or text messages or vacations. It's about how you made him feel at his core. And here's the reality. Those kinds of emotions aren't easily replicated. He can swipe right hundreds of times. He can date someone new. He can attempt to fill the void with someone who meets the same criteria, but eventually he'll recognize something is lacking. Because chemistry isn't a checklist. It's not about common interests or superficial compatibility. It's a rhythm, an energy. It's the way your sarcasm complemented his in a manner that made your banter feel like a private language. It's how you could transition from serious to laughing in an instant. It's how he felt more authentic with you than he does with most people, even when he wasn't making an effort. And once someone has felt that, it ruins them for anything less. Now here's where it becomes even more genuine. When a man loses that kind of chemistry, especially if it concluded prematurely, his mind doesn't simply move forward, it compares. He'll meet someone new and initially it will feel fresh, exciting, but deep down he's conducting silent comparisons. He's searching for that same comfort, that same exhilaration, that same blend of ease and thrill he experienced with you. And if it's absent, if the rhythm feels off, if the laughter doesn't resonate the same way, if the moment seems somewhat more forced, he begins to wonder if perhaps what he shared with you was more exceptional than he realized. And the more he tries to advance without that same spark, the more keenly he feels its absence. It's not something he always acknowledges immediately. He might persuade himself he's past it. He might even tell his friends it simply didn't work out or we weren't compatible. But those are just words. Because what's occurring beneath the surface is this subtle, persistent longing, a whisper of memory that emerges when he's alone, that appears in quiet moments, in songs that remind him of you, in laughter that doesn't quite reach the same part of his heart. And sometimes the most challenging aspect for him isn't even the memory of you. It's the memory of how he felt in your company. That lightness, that playfulness, that electricity. He might attempt to pursue it again, but here's what makes this kind of chemistry so unforgettable. It wasn't created. It simply happened. It wasn't manufactured through effort. It existed because of the unique chemistry between you both. And when he can't recreate that, no matter how hard he tries, he begins to understand that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a common connection. Maybe it wasn't merely timing. Maybe it was something more significant. Now, this is the aspect people don't discuss enough, because we always hear about moving on as if it's a decision, as if it's simply about cutting communication or removing photos or distracting yourself with someone new. But the truth is, moving on isn't always about forgetting. Sometimes it's just burying. And buried emotions have a way of resurfacing, especially when you realize you've been trying to replace something that was never meant to be substituted. When a man experiences a connection that was truly rare, it doesn't matter how many people follow, none of them can rewrite what he already felt. That's why he thinks of you. That's why even if he doesn't reach out, even if he remains silent, there's still a part of his mind that circles back to the moments you shared. Because while time may dull the sharpness of memory, it doesn't erase meaning. He may forget the specifics of the day, but he won't forget how he felt in your presence. That kind of imprint, it endures. And sometimes the cruelest part for him is realizing that what he's seeking, he already had. But perhaps he didn't recognize it at the time, or maybe he wasn't prepared to fully embrace it. And that haunts him. Because now when he meets someone new, he's not starting with a blank slate. He's starting with a standard, a memory, a chemistry that still lingers in the background of his consciousness, reminding him that not everything can be rediscovered. He can try, he will try, but deep down, he knows genuine chemistry isn't reproducible. There's something about the narratives that never quite reach their conclusion that stay with us the longest. You see, when something ends in tumult, when they're shouting, finality, drama, our minds close that chapter for us. It's finished. There's no ambiguity. We may still hurt, but eventually we categorize that relationship, process it, and move forward. But when someone exits our life with grace, without blame, without bitterness, when it concludes not due to a lack of affection, but because of timing or uncertainty or a gradual drift, it doesn't feel like the story is over. It feels like it's paused. And that's what haunts him. The human mind is programmed to seek patterns, to complete narratives, to find resolution. It abhors the unfinished loops. That's why incomplete conversations, unspoken truths, and unexpressed feelings echo most loudly in our thoughts. So when he recalls you, he doesn't just remember you, he remembers the possibility, the potential of what might have been if circumstances were different, if he had shown up differently, if he had appreciated what he had when he possessed it, if life or timing or fear hadn't intervened. And here's the element most people overlook. The absence of drama can be more resonant than its presence. When you depart quietly, respectfully, without burning bridges, you give him the space to view the situation clearly. And that's terrifying, because in that clarity, he sees that you weren't attempting to manipulate him. You weren't pleading for love. You weren't pursuing someone who wasn't prepared. You simply recognized your value and you chose your peace. And in doing so, you activated a switch in his mind that he may not be able to deactivate. There's something deeply unsettling, in the best possible way, about a woman who walks away without slamming the door. Because now, every time he passes through that same entrance, every time he dates someone new, every time he's out with friends, every time he finds himself laughing but not quite feeling it in his soul, he's reminded of what he surrendered. And it wasn't just a person, it was a feeling, a presence, a serene confidence, that rare sacred quality that made him feel more connected to himself when he was around you. And make no mistake, he might appear fine. He might even behave as if he's moved on. He might immerse himself in work, travel, dating, distractions, but none of that signifies. His mind isn't revisiting you when the noise subsides, when the commotion fades, when he's alone at night, when he hears a melody or detects a familiar scent or returns to a place you once visited together. That's when your presence seeps back in, not because you're haunting him, not because you're clinging in some unhealthy manner, but because the connection you shared didn't suffer a dramatic demise. It simply faded. And fading things are the most difficult to release. He doesn't have a moment to identify and say, that's why it ended. So his mind continues searching, continues wondering, continues hoping for some form of resolution that will likely never materialize. And here's the truth. You didn't require closure, but he does. Not the kind where you call and explain yourself, or reopen wounds, or permit him re-entry to try again. No, he needs closure within his own mind. And that's the type that takes the longest to discover, especially when the door was left unlocked, but you never returned through it. You became a question in his mind, one that persists when he least anticipates it. And depending on the man, he'll either use that question to develop or he'll attempt to silence it. Some will evolve. They'll reflect and understand that they needed to lose you to comprehend how to value someone like you. Others will simply carry the ache, never fully confronting what they relinquished. Either way, you've become a reference point, a before and after, a moment in time that altered something within him, whether he acknowledged it or not.